Well, good morning. If we haven't met, my name is Sean Palmer. I live here in Houston, and David has given me very little information about what to do today. So he did tell me we have actually a guest in town preaching at our church this morning, and I said I can come and help you out, but I've got to be able to get back down to at least one of our services downtown. So he told me, he says, well, I usually try to wrap up about 9:45. And I thought that's a really good idea because this is a Sunday morning Bible class, and I have not actually taught a Sunday morning Bible class in 13 years. So you may want me to wrap up by 9:45. Like, just put an end to the whole thing. So we're going to spend some time. He told me you guys have been working your way through John Mark Comer's book, Practicing the Way. Are you all working through it, or is he working through it and just kind of like working? Okay. So I knew when I got here this morning and no one was coming in actually with the book. I said, no one besides David has read this book. Which is good, because I'm actually kind of mixed on the book. And I'll tell you why. Which is a great place to start, with telling you all the problems you have with the book. Which I don't have any problems with the book. If this content, when you're done, when David's through in a few weeks, kind of working through some of this content, if it's really interesting to you and you want to explore more, this is a handy book to get into that conversation, but it's not the best book to get into the conversation. And the reason is what John Mark has done is a great service to the church, is that he's taken some other people's work that's really dense and hard to work through and made it accessible for folks who didn't go to seminary and don't read philosophy. So I would say if you're the kind of person that just sort of geeks out on that kind of stuff, then go back and first pick up Dallas Willard's The Divine Conspiracy. And I will tell you this about The Divine Conspiracy, because The Divine Conspiracy makes every single person who's ever read it feel stupid. And that is, you will read 2 pages and have to go back and read those 2 pages again. Because Dallas was a philosopher and extraordinarily smart, and he's making very intricate and nuanced arguments about spirituality and the spiritual life. And it's okay if you don't get it. That's why we need a book like Practicing the Way. And Dallas's other book, one of his other books that's really important, is called The Great Omission. And that's about spiritual formation. And the argument of the book is in the title of the book, which is essentially that what has happened in Christendom in the West is that we became really good, and being a Christian became associated with church, like church attendance, church participation. And because most of you are like me, I turned 50 last month. Most of you are like me. You grew up in a religious ecosystem, or were introduced into a religious ecosystem that was basically about getting people to go to the right church versus conversion of people. And so when Christianity became about church denomination or non-denomination, about frequency, those became spiritual habits. And what happened, or at least what my experience has been, is that for the past 26 years, as I've worked in local churches, people come to me and they say things like, I feel like I'm not growing spiritually, or I don't know how to grow spiritually. And the things that I've tried don't feel like they're working. Well, what have you tried? And basically what people have tried is church attendance, Bible reading. Some folks are going to read through the Bible, that just kind of onboarding information would do the trick. Not that this is a bad habit, because my mother does this. So it's not, and my mom, if you're watching, I'm not saying this is bad. My mom reads through the entire Bible every year. Some of the meanest people, not my mother, some of the meanest people that I have ever known also read through the entire Bible every year. So like information alone doesn't equal transformation or life change. But we were kind of told that it did. And if you went to enough Bible studies, maybe if you even added on a Bible study like in your community, like I'm sure some folks here have done BSF or Experiencing God, or they've done something with a small group, and you come out of that process and you know a whole lot about the Bible, and so you can chart, here are the minor prophets. And I remember as a kid, do y'all remember this? I remember as a kid on Sunday nights, people giving lessons about Paul's missionary journey, and they would have a map and show you every place that Paul went. And as a kid, I thought it was because I was a kid, but it turns out it wasn't. But as a kid, I thought, who cares about this? Like, this is like a travel journey, like travel log show, like this Rick Steves on the Bible. But the assumption was that knowledge equaled transformation. And as you grow older and have different experiences, one of the great experiences is, if you have the blessing of raising children, is that you realize that knowledge does not equal transformation. My daughters are 20 and 17, and that 17-year-old has to be told to unload the dishwasher every single day. It's not because she doesn't know that we run the dishwasher every single day, that she has not inhabited the habits into her life to go and unload it without being told. If she were to do it without being told, that would actually be a kind of transformation of character, right? So knowledge is not helping her at all. Punishment is not helping her at all either. So if you got something, let me know. So a lot of things that we tried haven't worked. And so what Willard is saying is that what's happened in Western Christendom is that character transformation virtually doesn't exist in most Christian churches. That the idea is, if you spend time here for long enough, embedded in certain practices, they actually do change your life. So I want to talk a little bit about practices before I even get to the lesson. None of this is all free. Why John calls this book Practicing the Way is because we actually behave our way into character change. We don't think our way into character change. This is why, 20 years ago, when Rochelle and I were young and married, and we were trying to get our lives together and finances, and it was like cut up credit cards, or if you have a credit card, like put it in a freezer bag, fill it with water and put it in your freezer, because that forces a character change, right? Because you can think, I don't want to spend money, but if you add obstacles to doing something, you actually bring about character change. And then if you spend a year, 2 years, not spending money on certain things in a certain way, you don't want to anymore. It's very much like eating. You crave what you eat. So if you're the kind of person that says, like, I just love donuts. I eat donuts every morning. Well, the more you eat donuts every morning because you eat donuts every morning. If you ate vegetables for dinner every night, 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, 12 months, what you would actually crave is vegetables. We behave our way into change, which is opposite from the way many of us have been taught that we change. And so there are practices, spiritual practices, that are long time tested, that once you begin to embed those practices in your life actually produces change. So, we just wrapped up a series at my church on the fruit of the Spirit. So, one of my practices around patience. Fruit of the Spirit, Galatians 5, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. One of my practices about patience. I am an impatient person. Anybody else here an impatient person? Just raise your hand. Quickly. I'm an impatient person. How do I become a more patient person? Guesses?
By having to wait.
By having to wait. When I'm at the store, I can get in the longest line. When I'm driving down the freeway, I can get in the slowest lane. That is a practice that over time produces change. So we lived in California. In our backyard in California, we had the worst house that I've ever lived in when we were in California, but the best amenities around that house, because it was right on the edge of this park, this huge, beautiful park. And if you're wondering why California taxes are so high, it's because partly those parks are immaculate. They're like country clubs. But this park used to be the training facility for the San Francisco 49ers. Before they moved and they turned that into a city park, which meant it had its own power grid. It was nurtured, manicured in a certain way. And in our backyard, right next to that park, we had an orange tree. And so, most of the year, if you wanted an orange, we never bought oranges. You just went out back and picked one off the tree. And they were great. But you could sit on my porch every day, all year, and never see an orange grow. That's how spiritual formation works. It's not observable day to day. You change slowly, and we change over time in accordance with the conditions. So, hard truth about character change and spiritual formation that you're probably not going to like, and people push back on me all the time. But it's true, and I'll stand on this. You cannot make yourself more spiritual. So one of the things that John Mark talks about in this section of the book is willpower. You cannot make yourself more spiritual. What you can do is create the conditions in your life that create transformation. So, conditions from other examples. Conditions like freezing your credit card. Conditions like the slowest lane. So at the end of your time together working through this, you're going to create a rule of life. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But a rule of life are practices that you intend to implement in your life to produce the kind of changes you want. And for every character flaw, there is a practice that will transform that piece of your character. So whatever your perceived character flaws are, if you don't have any, ask your wife, husband, or children, or your parents, and they will be glad to tell you. There is a way to begin to shift who you are to become a person that is more Christ-like. So, and all those are practices. So, story. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how the soul works. No, we're just going to talk about how the soul works. Well, the church I was raised in, and maybe you were raised in, was in Christendom culture, And I was raised to believe that what's most important about the spiritual life is not what I practiced, but what the church practiced. So the church practiced things like a cappella music or a certain kind of polity. And if we got those church practices right, then that made me a good Christian. So the life endeavor was to find the church that got church practices right and then faithfully be a member of that church, that local church. And I come to believe that the most important thing about me and the most important thing about you is our soul. And Christians don't talk about souls very much anymore. And when we do, it's mostly around issues of where will your soul go when you die? This is what Dallas Willard calls the gospel of sin management. That the most important thing you can do is manage your sin, which has absolutely nothing to do with God. Like if you could just work hard enough at not sinning enough, you don't have to love God, you don't have to worship God, you don't have to enjoy being in the presence of God. How much time does the average person think about enjoying being with God? That God is enjoyable to be around. And if beliefs about church weren't enough in the church I grew up in, the culture around me, both then and now, said that if you can't believe in God in church, if you don't want to do that, then you should just make everything about yourself. If you don't believe me, you can just listen to the way we talk about self. If you are stressed or burned out, what should you do? Self-care. If you have a test, an audition, you have a presentation to make at work, who should you believe in? Yourself. If you're in a fight with a friend or spouse or parent or roommate, someone that you love, who should you stand up for? Yourself. If you go on a date, who should you show up as? Yourself. But have you ever thought about how yourself came to be yourself? How did I get to be me? And not just DNA-wise or biologically, but why do I have the predilections I have? Why do I have the struggles that I have? Why do I have the virtues I possess and the vices I possess? And what if yourself that you're standing up for and believing in and showing up as and caring for, what if yourself is a mess? What do you do then? That's not going to be solved on the next church retreat. And I don't know about you, but I was consulted on every bad decision that I've ever made. I was in the room when I made that bad decision. I was the fool who proofed it. I was there for the whole thing. And what I wish I knew sooner was that I should not be as concerned with self-care. I should be more concerned with inner care. Dallas Willard said, "What is running your life at any moment is your soul." What's running your life at any moment is your soul, not your circumstances, not your thoughts, not your intentions, not even your feelings, but your soul. The soul is the center of your well-being. So, how are humans structured? Well, first of all, you came into this world with a will. At the core of us, what makes us, the first thing that we possess is a will. We have heart, heart and spirit, but the will means that we have ability to choose. What makes you a human being is your will. You know this if you've ever been around a newborn who is hungry, wet, or tired. You come into life wanting something and not wanting other things. That is your will. That's why toddlers, kids, most kids' first word is, does anyone know what most kids' first word is? It's not mine, but it's close. Most kids' first word is daddy, because it's the easiest to say. And their second word is no. Okay. So the first word is actually an affirmation for wanting something, to have someone address their needs. And mom is harder to say than dad. And these are the two words they hear first. Like, here's mom, here's dad. Dad's easier to say, but it's an expression of positive will. I want something. And the second word is an expression of negative will. I don't want something. No. Then you become a little bit older, and outside of your will, you start to form your mind, not your brain. Because most people born in the world have a functioning brain. And the scriptures, Jesus does not teach us to love God with all of our brain. Jesus teaches us to love God with all of our mind. And the mind is where we have our thoughts and feelings, where our desires are formed. One of the ways that the West has chopped up the individual is this arbitrary, artificial wall between thoughts and feelings. And they will say things to one another like, he's a feeler or she's a thinker. And that is both emotionally and neurologically impossible. We think our feelings and we feel our thinking. And some of us think that we're thinkers because that makes us feel good. And so when you begin to change either one of those, you change the other because they cohabitate, because they are the mind. So when we feel differently, there are people who you love who can say things to you that you would not take from anyone else. That's because of a feeling, not because of the thought that was expressed, or whether you agree or disagree with the thought. But it's also where desires are formed. What do I want from my life? What do I want my life to look like? This is the place where we begin to ask the most spiritual question you can ask. The most spiritual question you can ask is, what are the outcomes that my life is arranged around? Because those are the outcomes that you will get. So when it comes to virtues, when it comes to fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, is my life arranged around those outcomes to be that kind of person? Is my life arranged to be a kind person? Well, if your life practices are finding memes and posting them on Facebook, your life is probably not arranged to be a kind person. Right? If you are fundamentally an argumentative person and you like being right, and you kind of introduce tension, your life is not arranged to be a person of peace. Does that make sense? Because those are expressions of desire. And that happens in the mind. So you have your will, and then outside of your will, you have your mind. And then outside of your mind, you have your body. This is where your will is enacted in the world. Last year at our church, we did a series on the body. And most of the time when you're around Christians and you say, we're going to do a series on the body, the assumption is that we're going to do a series on the appropriateness of different kinds of behaviors within romantic relationships. But that's very limiting to what God means with your body and what you do with your body. Your body is the place where that thing, your will, is enacted in the world. So, if your will is to be an Olympic marathoner, the marathon is today in the Olympics, always the last event. You have to have a will to do that. You have to make some positive assertions and some negative assertions. Your mind has to desire it, but it can only happen if you enact it with your body through practices over time. But the body can also enslave your will. And so what we believe can happen is that when we have a problem, we think that our will can override that problem. But that's not actually true. Habits have to override the problem. And habits are enacted in the body. So if you want to lose 20 pounds, you can have a will for it. You can have a mind. You can read the books, get the right diet plan, but it has to be enacted in the body. And that takes habits. If you don't ever learn anything else about spiritual care and character formation, I want you to know this. So my friend John is the one who told me this years ago, and it's always stuck with me. Habits eat willpower for breakfast. We think willpower can do it, and it won't. There just aren't enough Bible studies in the world to make your habits change. So, we start with a will. And outside of our will is our mind. And outside of our mind is our body, where all of that's enacted. And then we have relationships. I have a mother and a father. I have a wife. I have 2 daughters. My will and my mind and my body affect my relationships the most. This is why you should pay great attention to people's habits and their life rhythms. Because their will, mind, and body will affect you. So, my oldest is a junior at University of Texas, and this year, the place she lived this last year has this really great gym in the bottom of her apartment. So this spring, she started going to the gym that's just right there instead of the big gym that's on the other side of campus. That's a pretty long walk. And I was like, well, you're working out anyway. What difference does it make how long the walk is? And she's, there are guys in the gym, which if you are a college girl or college guy, is a reason that you go to the gym. And so here's the problem with meeting someone at the gym. How into the gym are they? Because if they have a habit and a rhythm that puts them in the gym 3-4 hours a day, that's 3 or 4 hours a day they don't have for you. Doesn't make it bad. Could be in many respects really good. They could be training for the Olympics. The University of Texas, it's 14 gold medal winners at the Olympics this year, by the way. A&M has 2, but I'm not saying anything about that. But that's where what your life is ranged around, comes to play in the lives of other people. Is someone in the habit of always blaming people? Are you in a relationship with someone who is always aggressive or abusive? Our habits actually determine who we are in the real world, and they affect our relationships first. So when someone says, oh, I did this thing, but that's not really me, maybe let that slide the first time or the second time. But when you notice that it's a habit, it doesn't matter what they say, that's who they are. And the best thing you can do for them and for yourself is to believe them. Like, that's just who she is. That's just who he is. And do I want to live in that? And when you notice about yourself, I always have this same reaction to this person. Why is that? This is not the person I want to be around this person. And so I need to address that. And then holding all of that together is the soul. And the soul is at the helm of the whole person. So you've seen Inside Out 2. I know some of you have. If you haven't seen it, they're both movies about emotions and growing up with emotions. And there is a control panel that controls this girl, Riley, controls her life. And there's joy and sadness and anger, in the first one. And then in the second movie, no one's seen this. It's made almost $1.5 billion. What they're missing in Inside Out is the simple truth that all of that's being controlled by the soul. That it's not just like joy hops up to the control panels, or anger or sadness or ennui, that all of that is being controlled by the soul. And once we start to work through the soul, that's when we begin to see transformation of character. So what's controlling your life at any given time is your soul. So why did you have that sharp reaction to that person? It's a soul question. Why are you frustrated by the same things? It's a soul question. Why do you find joy in the places you find joy? Why do you spend money or not spend money the way that you do? All of those are soul questions. And there are practices, habits, that then help you transfer and transition your soul into a more Christ-like shape. So, C.S. Lewis talks about transformation in terms of being a house, right? So my girls, my wife, for a long time really liked watching HGTV shows. And some of those shows like Fixer Upper, Rehab Addict, all of those shows are the same show. And all you need to see are the first 10 minutes and the last 10 minutes. Like everything in the middle is just incidental. Because what they are trying to show, what the show really is a visualization of dramatic change, transformation. They want to show dramatic transformation, and that's all you need to see. And so C.S. Lewis, well before HGTV, says this. He says, imagine yourself as a living house. God comes in to rebuild that house. At first, perhaps, you can understand what he's doing. He is getting the drains right and stopping the leaks in the roof and so on. You knew that those jobs needed doing, so you are not surprised. But presently, he starts knocking the house about in a way that hurts abdominally and does not seem to you to make sense. What on earth is he doing? The explanation is that he is building quite a different house from the one you thought of. Throwing out a new wing here, putting on an extra floor there, running up towers, making courtyards. You thought you were being made into a decent little cottage, but he is building a palace. He intends to come and live in it himself. So I don't think you can understand Christianity without understanding the Holy Spirit. And that what God intends is for his will to be expressed through your body, in your relationships, and in the world. Why do we treat people well? Because God made them. And God lives inside them. And why do we have certain ethics around what our own body does, where our feet take us and what our hands do? Why would you not cheat someone at work? Why would you not abuse someone? Why would you not sexually abuse someone? Why would you use your tongue to lie? Because God's in there. And so why would you go through the trouble of building habits and rhythms in your life that produce particular outcomes? Because you are making a space for God. And there are certain things that God just can't be around. This is why, I can never remember who said it. He said, the flames of heaven will, for some, the flames of heaven will be hotter than the flames of hell. And so let's say that you just really love abusing people. And that never changes. You have no indication that whoever you are becoming right now, that you won't continue to become that for the rest of your life. If you were to spend eternity with God and you loved abusing people, you would be miserable with God. Like, what are you going to do in a heaven with a God who is truth if you have built your entire life on lies? So we begin to shape our lives around practices that will change us to make us a place where God, just like he was in Jesus, is pleased to dwell. And so you wake up in the morning, and the question then becomes, what in my life needs to change for me to be the kind of person where God is pleased to dwell? So the New Testament says the Christians will reign on Christ on high. That's what Dallas Willard calls life is training for reigning. How do you become the kind of person whom God can trust with great responsibility? Because you have folks in your life already, right? Like maybe when your children were little, folks that you've worked with, that you do not trust them with very much. Because they lack the character traits, the maturity, development to be trustworthy with it. How do you become the kind of person whom God can trust with great responsibility? So, it's 9:45, and I did it. But before I take off to head downtown, thoughts, questions, reactions. I think I've got time for just a couple. I know that was a lot, which is why John Mark Comer wrote this book, because it makes all of that really accessible. So, anyway. I did such a great job explaining it. But, well, I will receive that. So, you guys are in for a treat. Sam's preaching this morning for you all. I got to spend some time with him last night at Derek and Amy's, and I wish I could stay and hear him. So, you guys, I hope, if this has been horrible, I hope your Sunday gets better. If it's been great, it will still get better. Let me pray for you, and then you can head over. God, thank you for this time together. And we would ask that you give us nudges and glimpses, insights into the places where you are moving us to be more like Jesus. And Lord, that you would just give us a deep sense of your presence with us in all things, that we are not alone, but that we are being aided and can only do things just as Jesus did by your Spirit. And so we ask your continued blessing, especially on teachers and students as they return to school this week and in the coming weeks, that this would be a blessed time of connection and growth and learning for them as well. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks for having me.